Welcome to the N1 Fitness Podcast. I'm super stoked to have my dear friend and mentor, Joseph Maldonado, on the show. Joseph has a master's degree in human communication from NYU, where he was also a full-time instructor. He also authored 2 books and has a thriving personal life consulting practice. Welcome, Joseph.
Hey, nice to be here. Nice speaking with you.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of our combo today, can you just give folks a bit of a background on yourself and how you got into the life consulting game?
Yeah, the foundation of my work really started during my teen years, and it was primarily spiritual curiosity. When I started working on trying to understand myself better and self-development, self-discovery, before the term was really made accustomed of New Age at the time, it was just, spiritual work. And, there was a thin line between it. There was spiritual work, and then there was, the occult. And it all kind of fit into the same thing for me, but for others, it was, the occult, which was kind of the dark secrets, and some people saw it as a devil-leaning type of thing. But in New York at the time that I was doing this, and I'm originally from New York, there was just one single bookstore in all of New York that carried any self-development books of any kind, really. And it was called Samuel Weiser's Bookstore. And it eventually started publishing also. So it really springboarded from there. Today, whether it's online or actual bookstores, you can find a section of self-development everywhere. But at the time, it was just this one place. And so I used to go there and collect books from anything from learning about astrology to psychology to philosophy to religion, you name it. I grabbed it, all in the name of wanting to understand who I was and to uncover more of who I am. So that was kind of my springboard in terms of personal work, to studying different kind of philosophies, religions, and so I did exactly that. So for many years, my work was strictly, spiritual in terms of how it would be explained to others, and the spiritual arts, the psychic arts they called it even at the time, and always with an undercurrent and understanding the philosophies underneath it, and philosophy itself, and all the different religions. But I never understood how to make this into a practical kind of thing. And I didn't like what I was seeing in the world of mentoring at the time and of coaching, which wasn't a term at the time, but along those lines, because it was always very spiritual and very out there, not very grounded. And your practical type person wasn't even interested in considering it or looking in that direction. So I thought of, how do you go about making this more practical? And I stumbled into the answer that I was seeking, and that was through a professor I had at Queens College in New York, who was an extraordinary person who figured out how to take these concepts and make it very practical through communications. And it was through communications that I learned how to teach spirituality and basic human self-development insights, tools, and techniques. It was through communications that I was able to implement all these things I had learned in my spiritual studies and make it quite practical so that I could then help others that were normally not within reach of seeking this type of assistance and help and not understanding that it was even there. So I created a bridge, and I made it quite practical. For instance, speaking of the term intrapersonal communication, well, it's just communication with yourself. And I was able to use that to direct the person to understanding how self-communication occurs, and how it occurs metaphorically, not through the chatter you hear in your heads, which is more ego communication. Self-communication is in pictures, and that's why we dream in metaphors and in images. And like they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words. We're given extensive information from our deeper selves through these symbols and these pictures. And so when I would explain intrapersonal communication, I was able to do it in a very practical way and help people understand that they can begin to communicate with themselves and to distinguish when you're communicating with yourself versus when your ego is talking to you in your head, with the chatter and the static. So that was one practical way versus interpersonal communication, which then led me to being able to help people, lead people into understanding how to function with each other and interrelate with each other. Again, using an understanding of the deeper connections, using communication as another word for spirituality for a long period of time. I took that approach. And so when I taught in university, I was able to teach, these deeper concepts to communications. So the result was often from the students, I thought I was taking a fluff course, and this turned out to be the most important course that I've ever taken here. So that was quite rewarding. So there's a lot more to it that led to it, but basically I transitioned from my own curiosity about myself in life and studying everything that had to do with spirituality to transitioning in its expression to communication. So today it's a combination of both. I'll take a very practical approach to show people how to communicate with themselves, each other, and their lives. Because everything in one form or another is a communication, whether it's the world speaking to us, or us to the world, to each other, or to ourselves. And the awareness of that kind of communication increases our interaction and our way to manage and move through life more powerfully. And so this is what I was able to transition and create. So I use that. And then with those clients that are looking for something more, I can get, right to the point around things from a spiritual perspective. So I work wherever a person's at, combining it or moving them along so they can begin to question something larger than just their day-to-day existence. If they're seeking something larger, if they're not, I give them what they're looking for and help them with where they're at. Right? It's not my intent to push anyone past what they're needing or wanting.
So I can speak to that practicality firsthand because I've been working with you for close to 15 years now. What do you find are some of the most common reasons that people come to see you?
Well, I always like to say it in this way. There's 3 different reasons people come to me. They come to me when there's a fire or a flood in their lives, and they want me to go and help them out, to turn it out or to relieve the flood. And that is when there's been a harsh situation, a grief-stricken one, an end of a relationship, a loss of something, loss of a job, things along those natures, things that they consider an alarming type of situation. So people come to me for that, and I help them with that. Then there's the second set of people who come to me after a fire and a flood, and they kind of want to get things back where they were. And I usually refer to the basement because that's, the basement is where everything comes up from, our subconscious, our unconscious. And so when these fires and floods occur, they occur stimulated from what's down there. And so they'll then come to me, the second group, when they want to put things back to where it was. So we go down to the basement, we put everything back where it was. And then there's a third type of person that comes to me, and that's the ones that come to me on a nice sunny day when there's no fire, floods, or anything to be put into place. And they want to go down into that basement to see what else is there. What else is there to repair, what wounds there are to heal, or what places in themselves that they can now begin to uncover and discover and face that can increase them and get to know themselves more. And so that's the more fun part for me, actually. I don't have as many clients that come for that than the other two, and you can imagine why. But the ones like yourself that I work with, that come on that nice sunny day, we get to look at and uncover different parts of a person and see the different layers that we can peel away, to what extent, always learning more and more that we're larger by the day and by the moment. So going into those deeper levels of ourselves, that's really my specialty. My years of practicing meditation and contemplation and self-examination has given me an insight and a space to hold people and help them find those deeper regions in themselves. And I do a lot of work on myself, a lot more than the average person needs to do, but that's because I do this work. And so the deeper and the wider I increase myself, the more I have to provide others. It's like the old analogy of the well. When you have a well that's filled and there for the drinking, it can take care of an entire community. But to fix a well, to create a well, and then to keep it going, there's a lot of work involved, and it's a long time before that well could be used. And it felt like that in my life. For a very long time, I was like, what's the use of everything I've learned and all this insight I've had? I can't seem to translate it and communicate it to others. But I realized that I was just under construction, as many of you are. Right? I was just under construction, and I had to finish this process of completing this well that now people come to drink from. And I get great pleasure from being able to be that, where people can come to drink from.
That's an amazing breakdown. Now, we seem to be super aware nowadays that we need to take care of our physical bodies with movement, working out, nutrition, things like that, etc. But we seem to be a little bit behind the eight ball when it comes to emotional fitness, as you've put it. So can you tell us a little bit about what emotional fitness is and then why we need to work at it just like our physical fitness?
Yeah, I again like to always take a historical perspective. When I was a kid, physical fitness was, I used to see it on TV with a guy called Jack LaLanne. And he opened up eventually a spa called Jack LaLanne's, which I think Bali bought out. So Bally's today was the old Jack LaLanne. And he was a fitness guru back then that would do exercise on television. But going to the gym, it wasn't even a health spa or anything like that. It was just something that some people did if they were into bodybuilding, but not as a way of life. So I remember a time where physical fitness was as obscure as emotional fitness or mental fitness. But it grew over the years, and people started understanding the nuances, and they started zooming in. And as you zoom into a subject, it's just like if you painted a wall and you waited, right? Eventually you'd see all these spots, especially if it's painted over something white. You see the white spots coming through, and then you have to paint it again because, after it seeps in, what's left comes out, and you have to do it a few times. Well, it's the same thing with physical fitness. We zoom in, and we started seeing over the following decades that nutrition was a vital part of it. The idea of calories or caloric intake, or that, what's a carbohydrate, what's a protein, it wasn't very popular. People didn't understand those terms as we talk about it so normally today. It's part of the common language. Back then, it wasn't, and that's in my lifetime. So it hasn't been very long that physical fitness has now found its place and its respect that it's long deserved, and its importance in taking care of the body and getting the most out of life. Right? We've got this body so we can experience life fully. Healthier it is, the more fully we can experience life. Now we also have two other bodies, three really, but the three that matter the most are physical, mental, and emotional. When you consider the spiritual body, we can put that aside for now because it's not really your classic body either, though it has a lot of the similar things that are involved in taking care of it. I've spent a lot of time really doing mental health work with people, but focusing powerfully on the emotional body. Now, just like the physical body, the emotional body needs to be fed. It needs to be rested. It needs to be released. Now, we eat all day long and we drink all day long, and we don't have a problem with that. And why? Again, so that this body is strong and can experience life fully. And we eat more and drink more than we need, always. And so what happens to the waste? Well, we don't have a problem, again, with that. We've created rooms in our home to get rid of the waste. We've got bathrooms. Now, we also feel all day long and think all day long, more than we need. Why? To be able to experience life fully. Now, what do we do with this excess emotional crap or mental crap? Where does that go? Well, there's natural ways that is filtered out, that energy, because when you say I feel crappy, you actually literally are holding energy that makes you feel that way. It's excess. There may not even be anything wrong with you. You're just carrying around crap and you need to take a dump. It's that simple, right? So there's three natural ways that we eliminate this, and that is through sleep, good, deep sleep, connected sex, and exercise. And that releases a lot of the mental and emotional crap. Now, when we're having extra emotional challenges, extra mental challenges, and I'm grouping the two for now, even though they have their separate ways of dealing with things. As a side note, the mental health industry has incorporated emotional health with mental health, and I'm not saying they should be separated, but there's more specialization that's needed for the two because they're kind of separate bodies. Right? So to continue, when you have a trauma of some sort, when you have some sort of extra emotional charge that hits you or you're triggered, a lot more energy comes up, meaning a lot more leftover crap. And so how do you release this? And this is the key to a lot of the work that people do on an emotional and mental level to help people heal. And that's nothing more than releasing the crap half the time. So a lot of people are afraid to come for a conversation, a session of an emotion, to either look at their emotional bodies or their mental bodies, because they think there's something wrong with them, but it's just that they're maybe constipated. It's after release that they're actually okay, that they're holding on to this. And holding on to your crap is something you become accustomed to. You learn this from your family system of what you share, what you don't. You do it in forms of things like secrets. You hold on to secrets. That's like holding on to crap in that fashion. We hold on to crap by repressing our expression. And so sometimes when we are fully expressed and we feel fully expressed, we feel a release, and that also helps us let go of some of the crap. So when you're having a session, whether it's in your case, a physical fitness session, a person feels better because they're releasing some toxins and energy physically. And there's always a byproduct. You see, all three are interconnected, by the way. There's a byproduct of also some emotional and mental release while you exercise physically. The same occurs emotionally because it just gets rid of the crap that lightens the body and lightens the mind. When you do mindfulness, that lightens the emotional body a bit more and the physical body. So the idea here is to understand that you have three bodies and each one needs a separate type of attention, and it has to be cared for, and it has to be given a bath, and it has to be fed and directed, just like the physical body. And so a large part of what I teach through my seminars, books, or personal sessions is exactly that, how to care for what is the emotional body and a bit about the mental body and how do you care for it. And then for some people I work with, we also talk about the spiritual body in part. But the thing I think for most of your listeners, the primary thing to really get is you have three bodies. We didn't even understand that we have one body to work with, back in Mad Men days, right?
Right.
They handled their stress through drinking and sex. And that didn't get that generation very far physically, did it? Right? Their health has suffered for it. Alzheimer's, dementia, and other physical ailments, not just mental, are at a level never seen before. And that's because they didn't understand how to manage these things in a modern world. So that's the first thing to begin to understand. Hey, when I'm dealing with my personal health is not just my physical body. It might make my emotions and my mind feel a little better, but it's not enough. Just like going to school is not enough for your physical and your emotional body, though it might have helped it a little bit. That you have three bodies, and we're learning, just like I did as a child, we're learning, and we're going to have insights and nuances about the emotional body and the mental body that we never had before. I'm starting to take the extra time with this, but I want to give this explanation. Somebody gave me this example years ago. They said there's this guy in New York who everybody goes to have their logos done. And people don't quite understand why they want to go to him, but when he produces these logos, they're amazing. And people will wait, big corporations will wait for him to do their logos. And when he was interviewed and asked what his secret was, he explained it this way. He said, let's say he's creating a red Nike swoosh. What he would do is he would put in the red, fix it all up, set it up, and then he would zoom in with his computer or what have you, zoom in. And as he zoomed in, like the wall I was speaking of earlier, you see all these white spots. And he'd fill that in, right? Digitally fill in more red. Now, that's where most of his peers stopped. But he didn't. He'd zoom in multiple times until it was so deeply filled, a lot more time consuming, but so filled that when you finally came back and out, the richness of the red and how it came forth was so powerful that the eye couldn't really understand why it seemed different. But the consciousness understood that it was deeper and richer and full of quality, and it impacted a person. And so this is how you can live your life, a life of quality, and that comes by zooming in to these little nuances of the physical body, the mental body, and the emotional body, and understand eventually the interaction between them. So 100 years from now, this conversation is going to sound antiquated. It's going to be like me bouncing in front of the TV with Jack LaLanne. Because we're going to know so many nuances and technologies of how to apply to the mental, emotional, and physical body. And it's going to be an accepted norm that we take care of our bodies, not our body.
That's a beautiful breakdown. Now, speaking of zooming in, I'd love to get into the ego, which you mentioned a little bit before, and its different aspects, because I think it'll be helpful for folks to understand its inner workings just a little bit more. Can you explain what the ego is and then how it can sort of run the show, in a sense, from behind the scenes?
I'll give you something brief. I do an ego seminar, so, if I give it all away now, no one's going to come to the next one. Anyone interested in seeing the operations of an ego, I always refer the movie Revolver to them at first. This is a Guy Ritchie movie that I actually watched coincidentally, and you use the term coincidence. In its true meaning, it's things that coincide, that are actually synchronized and resonate at the same time. It's not the way we normally think of the term coincidence, where it's like by chance or by luck. But it occurred by chance or by luck that I watched this movie the day I decided, okay, I'm going to create this ego seminar. And I put this movie on because it was an action adventure. And the first thing, as it opens, it's speaking about the ego. So I realized, I guess I got to start working now. I don't have a day to take off before I get on it. So it's a great movie that they play out in movie form to give you an idea of an ego. And as a little bit of trivia, they say Guy Ritchie created it, modeling it after his wife at the time, Madonna. Right? So an appropriate ego to examine and work with and for us to understand. The ego is that part of you, to just say in brief, that gets you up in the morning in a sense that your soul has not a lot of want, you have to understand. It's good, right? It's willing to have experiences without value judgment of good or bad, right or wrong, left or right. And so it might not push for much other than what it might want to do on this earth. But the ego, on the other hand, is this energy and gift on some level. Now, it's a complete disaster. It's the devil for many people on another level when it runs itself. But the ego is this energy force that has you want to get up and do things. I often compare it when I think of Cesar Millan on how the ego as a dog. And if it's well trained, you can do marvelous things with this dog, and it's a great companion, and it can take care, protect, and handle things for you. But when left running rampant, it can make a mess of your life, and you're chasing after it. Right? And many of us chase after our ego wants and ego needs, like we're chasing after a dog down the block that got off leash and is not listening to our calls to stop. And so the ego is kind of this best friend that could become your worst enemy, that is very unique to human life. And again, if we didn't have it, why would we try to go to the moon? You see, the soul is not interested in the external as much as in uncovering the internal universe. We live between two infinities, you have to understand. When you look out and about, it goes further than you can see. Infinite. When you close your eyes and you look in, and you really keep still long enough, infinite. So where do we live? Well, we live between the two. And when we live inside of two infinities, the soul's urge is to go in and live in that infinity. There's plenty to do there. And that's best demonstrated by monks and other kind of, and yogis and other type of meditators of that kind that just go in. The ego has us explore the infinite outer part of our experience here. Now, we're not here long, 80, 90 years, that's not long. And so we need that to go out. And since the soul is not that concerned with the external, the ego rules externally. Hence why it's all about the glit and the glitter and not the gold. Not what's substantial. But when you can combine, when you, who live in the middle of the two, can extract from the soul level and work with your ego, then you become the master of your destiny. So you have to understand the workings of your ego. It's not about killing off your ego. It's about working with your ego and training your ego. And you become master of it. Hence, you become master of your destiny. Another way to look at how we live between two worlds, when I ask people, where are you standing on? Where do you live on? Well, it's the earth. You don't live inside the earth. You live on it. Right? Where's the earth? Below me. Where are the heavens? Above me. Where do we live? On the horizon. And Martin Heidegger explained, the old philosopher, explained that the horizon is what we live into every day. Things that come that's before us. And we have choices every day, new ones, to pick and choose on the horizon. And there's always multiple choices. So there really isn't about right or wrong. It's what we live into. And to understand what's best suited for us, we need a connection with our soul. And that connection provides more of what, when we're connected, provides information of letting us know more to our intuition, to a pull, to this kind of like, I must do that. This makes me feel passionate. Right? That comes from the soul. And when we're connected, we know what we want to do externally. When you're uncertain of what you want to do externally, it's either because you're not connected with your soul or you're under construction, meaning you're being built to be able to eventually do what you want to do, and you're still in the midst of it, so you're not quite sure where you're going next. So the ego is that instrument, and I'm simplifying it. And there's a lot of aspects to it. I've zoomed in and created a seminar, so there's multiple aspects to the ego that would be quite fascinating to discover. But fundamentally, the ego serves the purpose of helping us function in the world, interact with each other, want to get out of bed in the morning, to go forth, and to create, and to be part of this existence, and to have a full human experience. Anthony Robbins, to explain the idea of what gets you out of bed in the morning, Anthony Robbins points 4 different reasons. And that is fear. Right? I've got to get my bills paid. I've got to take care of things. The first fundamental human challenge, fear. The next reason people get out is for safety and security. Right? To make sure everybody's safe and secure. I'm securing my job. I'm securing my existence. Right? And then the third is lust. Ooh, I want a Mercedes. I want a BMW. I want a big house. I want a lot of money. I want a lot of men and women in my life. I want a lot of sex. And those are the 3 fundamental reasons we get out of bed, all ego-driven. He includes, when you finally connect with the soul, I'm adding this part, which I'm assuming he meant, when you get connected with your soul's urge, there's another 4th reason you get out of bed, and that's love. And just your love that comes forth of wanting to express yourself. And that gets you out. And so with the help of what the ego's created, because the ego is going to get you your education, your popularity, your connections, your networks, your friendships first for you. Right? So that when your soul steps into that position, you already have all these things in place for it. So it's ideally important to build your ego. When you think of someone that without an ego, you then have to think of a feral child, one that was raised in the wild, one whose brain is underdeveloped. Developing your ego goes hand in hand with developing your brain. You cannot stop the ego or change it or control it until you build it. And so a lot of people are trying to cut their ego off before they even build it. No, we got to build a nice solid ego, and then from there the spiritual work begins to now be interacted with the ego. Again, I refer you back to Caesar Milan. If you want to wonder and look at something that gives the image of what I'm talking about here, a dog that's really wild, and what you can do with the same pet once you're in command of it.
So when things get a little bit out of hand, is it safe to say that that's the equivalent of, in that case, Caesar kind of like checking the dog before it runs off or gets too far into whatever it's getting into?
Yes, we always check ourselves, and there's different ways we check ourselves. We can use repression to check ourselves because we aren't able to keep still and not be moved by its influence. So we have to use other methods. Because again, ideally you want to be able, and this is where meditation comes in, ideally you want to be able to be still enough and allow yourself to feel what you feel without chasing after it. So meditation teaches you how to keep still no matter what you're feeling. And life has gifted us something. It's gifted us a world that is always changing. Right? The Buddhists call this term anicca, meaning things are always changing, the impermanence. And so because life is impermanent, because things are always changing, that's actually a gift. Because if you have to sit there and be with some misery, let's say, or a pain, because of this law of life, if you sit there and be with it long enough, it changes. The pain goes away. It shifts. It might even go to another pain, but it's not the same pain. And so when you meditate, you learn that this actually occurs. And so when you get an urge, right, to chase after something, to go after something, and you've seen that if I keep still, it changes, then now you feel more empowered not to do that. Now, to go to your question, if a dog just runs off and you don't have that centered ability, you actually have to repress yourself. Like, oh, I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to get high tonight. And you almost tie yourself down, and the energy it takes, and the pain you go through, and the tension and tying yourself down. What you have to go through is it requires so much energy that eventually you do it not that weekend, but the following. Right? Because repression doesn't work well. It's just a temporary fix. And repression will always lead to deviation. It's like, just put your hand on a garden hose and see what happens to the natural flow of water and how deviated it gets. So when we repress, when you repress a dog and you keep them still long enough and you still haven't trained them, they may stop for a little while under threat, but as soon as you're not looking, they start their shit again, don't they? So I'm not sure I answered your question fully there.
Yeah, no, that was great. Now, you touched on meditation. So when people say come to you and you have the recommendation, you feel like they could or would benefit from implementing meditation, I know that a lot of folks they feel like they're not doing it right, or they feel like they can't sit in one spot. Are there multiple ways that you get people to implement it based on where they're at the time and what you feel like they need?
One of the fundamental things I tell people is meditation is nothing more than going really still and quiet so that you can then listen. Right? So if you go quiet enough and I drop a pin on a carpet, you're going to hear it if we go quiet enough. So meditation gives you the opportunity to go so quiet with yourself that you finally hear what that little small voice inside, as they say. You start hearing the pains that are there, the things that are actually driving you, running you, things that are annoying you, that you're moving too fast or too busy in your life to have been able to pay attention. So I explain it that way so that a person can see a very basic benefit for themselves, to keep themselves in touch with what's going on. It's the difference between paying attention to your kids and not paying attention to your kids and how they turn out. And so this is a way to be able to pay attention to yourself. So it's very, looking at it just very simply that way. I like to often explain it just as starters that way. Then for people who never have done it, I just begin to recommend that they just try any kind of meditation at night, go online and go through a meditation so that they can just begin to relax in it and not be too intimidated by it. For some people, they feel nothing or good usually, either nothing or good and anything in between that. And it's a great way to begin to start. And so that builds them up to eventually then be considered, they want to try different kinds of meditation. Now, the meditation I use now, and I've used different kinds of meditation from transcendental meditation to Vipassana meditation, is the meditation that supposedly enlightened Buddha. Right? Now, when I recommend Vipassana meditation, it's not a religious or even a philosophical-based teaching. It's just a practice. And the practice is very similar. It helps you go really quiet and to the point that you can begin to sense things in your body that you otherwise weren't sensing. Now, you can go into a meditation to go quiet and then think about a problem that you're having, and that will help you see the problem. You'll get a reflection in it because the mind works that way. The mind can be hyper-analytical, breaking things down, or which is usually the activity of the left side of the brain, or you can see the overall picture, and that's the activity of the right side of the brain, which requires stillness. For you to see a clear reflection on a pond, it needs to be still. For you to really reflect about your life, your mind needs to be still. It works the same way. And so meditation allows you to find that quiet, and then you're able to see things in your life. Now, Vipassana doesn't really focus on you seeing and bringing up ideas of what's going on in your life. So those are other kinds of meditations, or just practicing going quiet and still, so that you can reflect. That you can do with multiple different kind of meditation types. But for the more strict or more serious meditator, I recommend Vipassana, because that works beyond the images and beyond your day-to-day problems and just deals with the sensations you're feeling. So you get used to being still no matter what the sensation that runs through you. And so obviously for addicts of different kinds, that is a powerful tool. And you can learn that you can actually stay centered and not be pulled. It gives you the strength and courage to overcome these type of addictions, and the ability, more importantly. So meditation could be for fun, for feeling a lightness, for getting in touch with your soul. It could be for reflection purposes, or it could be for self-conquering purposes, all the way to that point. And so there's no really one type that I would say is the best. There's different types for different things and different people need. So I always invite people to please meditate, because at the least, you find something that just gives you a little relief in your life and a little calm and a little lightness when things get a little heavy. And it's just a matter of a short period of time, actually, even though it seems like a long time at first. It's a short period of time. And don't forget about this mental and emotional crap that builds up. Meditation is a powerful way of going to the mental emotional bathroom. Yeah, I just wanted to give you a general overview of meditation and the different ways, because anybody can go into it, and most of the time people expand in a very strict fashion of you should meditate this way or this way or this way. I'm not. It depends on your intention. You determine it on which way what kind of meditation you can do. So it's always good to talk to someone who's meditated before you choose something, so that you can fine-tune it, zoom in, fine-tune the one that's best suited for you.
That's great. Now, when people go to sit down, say their first few times to meditate, and their mind wanders a bunch, like, it might be seconds before they are thinking about something that's going on later in their day or whatever. Now, that's completely normal, right? I mean, that people can't expect to be just super still right off the bat.
Yeah, it's absolutely normal. And the good part is when you first start, you get a first-hand experience of how the ego functions and how it takes you all over the place. So what you're actually able to possibly witness eventually is when it takes you, that's the ego, just distracting you in so many ways. It needs to split you up because the ego is seeking power, right? So, it will follow you just like any powerful soldier will follow you if you show more power than it. But If you don't, it's going to wreak havoc. And so the first stage is that you get to see how scattered your mind is and your focus. And it's okay, don't get discouraged. It's the key is, can you come back and start again? So this is why it's often good to just start focusing on a point, whether it's your breath, and the point that from where your breath comes out of your nose to the bottom lip, right there, and you just watch your breath. Or you pick something with eyes open, like a nail on the wall, and you just focus on that, and it brings you back. Or you focus on a word, a single point, and it's called single-minded point of meditation, right? Single-pointed of mind meditation.
Yeah.
Right? This allows you to have someplace to come back to after you shoot off, right? So let's say the word is just love, right? You come back to the word love, and you see the word love again so that you continue to breathe. And it's okay if you go all over the place, because you're building a muscle, and you want to know the truth. And listen, if someone comes and starts working out with you for the first time, they get the truth. They can't make believe they can lift something they can't.
Right.
And so it's no less discouraging than that. And it's encouraging because now you're with the right person in the right place to build those muscles. So it's the same when you start meditating, you get to see where you're at. And so if that's where you're at, that's where you're at. You can't fake that. And from that point forward, you can start beginning to build a muscle. So yes, the first thing is, and you probably prefer that your mind just goes everywhere, so that you can respect that. Okay, this is going to take some work to develop this art, and this art of focus, this art of being able to stay centered, regardless of what's going on around you.
Right. Now, when it comes to costs and payoffs, I think folks often wonder why they do things that seem to harm them, or they don't make sense, like eat too much or drink too much or sleep too little. For example, when they know it's not good for them, or whether it's a toxic relationship, the list goes on. Can you tell us a little bit more about costs and payoffs and how these concepts tie into our behavior?
But what I will say is, you first want to understand that when we are unaware, you respond from conditioning then. To the degree at which you're unaware of yourself is to the degree in which you will follow conditioning. Now, we've all studied our parents and watched how they handle things, and our relatives, and then our friends and our community. And we've been enculturated, and we've been programmed. And if you're unaware, you're going to follow a lot of these with whatever variation your particular personality applies to it. So if you're highly unaware of yourself, you're going to likely do things at any given moment that you didn't want to do, because it's your response, it's your conditioned response that might have worked for your mother and doesn't work for you. And so it turns out adverse, and you keep repeating that response. So let's say, your father was a womanizer or out there sexually with other people as a way to relieve himself. That's going to be something you're going to consider, or the complete flip opposite, right, of the same coin. Right? That energy, that experience of watching father being, let's say, a sex addict, becomes an option for you that you either double down and I'm not going to do this, which, by the way, might lead to a lot of different fetishes and deviances because you're repressing. Or the other side, saying, no, this is the way to respond. I'm going to go after relationships. I need someone there. So you're going to respond, if you're unaware, the way you've seen your parents respond. On top of that, depending on whatever traumas you've had, wounds, life wounds you've had and traumas, that's going to also determine. I've been speaking with someone called Jim Dowling. He does this type of work out in Ontario. And so he uses the term wound and woundology, depending on your woundology, your history of your wounds and the study of your wounds. Whatever way you've been wounded, you have created a defense mechanism, an adaptive defense mechanism from childhood. And that kicks in whenever you're in some sort of pain or need. And so you're going to do what you don't want to consciously do. And that's because you are in protected safety mode. And so when you're in that state of mind, it reduces your capacity to consider other options. And so there's not a lot you can do while you're unaware of yourself. So this takes self-awareness to see other options and other ways of handling it. But the reason is your wounds and your traumas and your conditionings that cause you to do these things you don't want to do. It's not as surface and basic as you think. And it thrives on unawareness.
So speaking of unawareness, where would you recommend that folks that are listening to this start? How can they start to build that a little bit on their own in their daily life, or whether it could just be something tiny? How can they start to build that?
Okay, I got one better for you. How would you answer that question in your line of work? Where does a person start if they want to get physically fit? And I'm going to show you the correlation, the method behind my madness here.
I would just say somewhere. Start doing something. Yeah, like whether it's walking or whatever, the easiest point of entry, essentially.
Exactly. Grab a book, right? Start reading the subject matter. You're interested in meditation? Grab a book on meditation. See what they have to say about it. Go take a meditation class. You're interested in a certain type of study? Go to a discourse. Take a seminar. Just to begin to get yourself your feet wet and get yourself in there. It's the same way, because it's just, you're asking the question, how do you take care of these bodies? And so you don't just jump in, right? And you don't know how to swim, and you can drown or have a bad experience and then blame the whole thing on that, right, and not went in too far. So the advice I would actually give is the same one that you would give, and if I didn't, we'd have a problem here. One of us is doing what we're doing wrong, right? But that's not the case. I agree with you. You start somewhere of a place that's you're interested in. Right? Start with your interest. Now, a lot of people get on this work because they've waited too long, and now they're in dire pain and it's need. So when you're, just to add that, I know you didn't ask that, but when you're at that point and you're in dire need, then, we're building a great foundation of therapists in different ways of methodologies and teachings that there's a lot more to choose from than when I was younger or I first started out in this work. And so go visit one, visit a few, see, they're becoming more and more affordable, visit a few to see who has some insight and direction, because it's all going to add to you, right? Because you want it from multiple directions, because we live in a multi-dimensional universe. And so you want it to come from different ways. So when you're in need, then seek out, professionals, whether it's professionals in depression or professionals in grief or professionals in relationships. Then at that moment, don't just dabble around, because it might take a while to find what you're looking for. Go specifically to what you've identified your need is. And if it's relationship issues, find yourself a relationship specialist, like myself. If it's grief, and I do a lot of grief counseling, and there's a lot of grief counselors out there, then do that. Right? Go there specifically. Otherwise, as you said, and if someone came to you after an accident, you might send them to physio first, or give them physio-type things, very specific. So it's the same exact thing. Love it. That's where I recommend you start.
Love it. Love it. So, Joseph, as we start to wrap up here, can you let folks know where they can learn more about you and the amazing work you do?
Sure thing. I have a website. It's I can be found at iamcenter.com. That's center with an ER for those who spell it with an RE.
Us Canadians.
I also have a YouTube channel. Marcus, I guess you can link that later. Offhand, I think it's called Joseph Talks or Joseph Speaks. So if you type in my full name, Joseph Maldonado, you can find my YouTube channel that we're just beginning to build up a bit. Those are two easy ways to reach me at offhand. and to hear more conversations through the YouTube channel of the different things that are thrown at me at any moment that, I speak on. Some of these conversations are about contemporary things going on, or, general, everyday life issue, challenges, needs that I get to give a response to.
Yeah, the YouTube channel has a lot of super great, just practical, quick videos and stuff like that and thoughts. So I'll link to all that stuff in the show notes. And thanks so much for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And it's through the website that you can find out when the next seminar is for those interested in seminars. So our seminars are very unique in their labeling. We have ego seminar, as I said. We have the darkness seminar. We have a communication seminar, family, friends, parenting seminar. We have the self-expression seminar. So you can see that, it's unique varieties of what people need. I created the seminars. And each seminar is uniquely different because as I change and grow, I'm always adding new material. And it always is driven. All my seminars are driven by the participants. So that's why each one doesn't come out the same, because I go with what the participants need in a moment. Just like with my clients on one-on-ones, rather than what I have structured in my outline. My outline is just the structure. So everybody that comes to my seminar, I tell them this, and they see it for themselves. It's true. We go in the direction the group goes, and it's always much more powerful and a lot more fun in that fashion. So, I just needed to throw in a bit more about the seminars, but thank you.
Yeah, and I've done pretty much all of the seminars that you've put on, and I've done the same ones that have been spaced years apart, and they're always different. Like, it's always the way that the group goes, so I can speak to that for sure.
Well, thank you for that.
All right, guys. Well, we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks for listening. See ya.